Last year, I hosted a live stream with a few other YouTubers to settle a question. A lot of people in history are the great, but who is the greatest great? There were many contestants, from generals of antiquity who brought half the sea to yield, to the most magnanimous of kings who gave peace and wealth to their abundant lands. But one stood head and shoulders above the rest. The greatest of the greats is none other than the King of Kings, the ruler of four corners of the world and a literal messiah, Cyrus the Great. This video is brought to you by Audible. Audible is your go-to destination for audiobooks, podcasts, and thousands of Audible originals. Frankly, Audible's been helping me create this show for a while. I listen to a lot of audio content while I'm working on these videos. It helps me focus and keeps me entertained. And now they're partnering with me to give you 30 days of premium membership for free. Last time I believe I recommended the full cast recording of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar because if you're into Roman history, honestly, it's captivating and it has the best burns on Cicero and Lepidus. But lately I've been listening to the new Obama book. The Bush years and Obama's first term were this interesting time that I lived through, but I wasn't really politically aware, so it's cool to revisit them like this. Plus, so much of what I do is trying to get inside the heads of historical figures, so having a historical figure read you his own memoir, that's the good stuff right there. Once again, Audible's offering 30 days premium for free. You can get it at audible.com/Rackam or text Rackam to 500. Even back in 550 BC, dynastic politics worked the same as ever. Cyrus was born the son of a king, and his mother Mandane was a princess whose dad was a bigger, more powerful king. Ancient Greek historians, in their slavish devotion to accuracy, somehow got a hold of a dream that Cyrus's pop-pop had where Mandane's hips burst forth with fruit-bearing vines and a flood that swept over the world. Quite alarmed by this prophecy, he brought forth his most trusted advisors, who told him, "I think Mandane should see a gynecologist." No, I've seen this kind of thing before. It means your grandson is going to take over the world." Lost to history were all his other prophetic dreams involving showing up to class in his underwear and discovering his teacher is Eddie Van Halen. Keeping on with the mythology, Cyrus is born and Pop feels threatened by the presence of an infant. The boy must die. But he doesn't want to kill a baby, so he tells his general to do it. But he doesn't want to kill a baby, so he tells his servant to do it. But he doesn't want to kill a baby, so he swaps Cyrus with his own stillborn son. But despite being raised by a servant family, Cyrus must have maintained his magic royal family powers or something, because somehow he gets the people around him to beat up a noble child for being ornery with him. The king thinks that's pretty fishy and discovers the boy is still alive. But by this point, I guess he realized he tried to murder a child because of a bad dream, so he reunites Cyrus with his birth parents. And then cooks up the general's son and feeds it to him as punishment for delegating an important assignment to someone else. Ah, Herodotus, your stories may not have been filtered for accuracy, but they make great content. Cyrus grows up and inherits Persia, but Persia is just this little rinky-dink kingdom among many, and he's still gotta recognize the overlordship of old Pop because he's the biggest, baddest king in town and he ruled over all the other kings. I know what you're thinking, that sounds a lot like an emperor right there, but it was a much looser control. Maybe more like Zhou Dynasty China?
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
But one day, Pop changes his mind again and decides he cannot leave this kid alone with a kingdom, so he invades. Or more accurately, he sends his general Harpagus to invade. And Harpagus decides, nah man, I really don't like you that much. And he invites Cyrus to help him out in a little rebellion. A few years later, Cyrus is now the King of Kings, sitting in Pop's throne, wielding his scepter and marrying his daughter, which would be Cyrus's aunt, right? None of the books I'm reading seem to be pointing that out, and it's a little confusing because it might not be, because Cyrus's grandfather also had a sister with the same name who married Nebuchadnezzar and, according to legend, had the Hanging Gardens built for her, but that was like 50 years earlier, and it would still be weird if Cyrus married her. Are we all just glossing over this, or am I missing something? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Alright, cut away from Cyrus for a bit, we'll get back there. There's a kingdom in Anatolia called Lydia, and it's led by a man named Croesus, who remains to this day a synonym for rich guy, because his kingdom was sitting on a boatload of gold just lying in a river. So much of it that the kings of Lydia didn't know what to do with it all, so they invented coins. He sees what just happened in Mesopotamia and is a little concerned about the balance of power. So, while the Persians are recovering from war, he figures he'll knock them down a peg. But just to be safe, he goes to see the famous Oracle of Delphi, a woman whose job it is to huff fumes in a cave and tell everyone what she sees. She tells him, "If you go to war with Persia, you will destroy a great empire." Ha! No room for misunderstanding there. So Cyrus is chilling out, maxing, relaxing all cool, when Croesus starts making trouble in his neighborhood. And luckily, Cyrus has still got Harpagus on his side because he comes in clutch yet again. He sticks camels at the front of his army so the enemy horses take one whiff and go, "What in God's name is that?" and scatter. Can we get Mythbusters in on this? After that, capturing the capital is no problem, because Cyrus has a secret technique of piling up dirt in front of the walls and jumping over them. So now, Cyrus has his hands on all of Croesus's newfangled coins, and he needs someone to take it all back to Persia. Enter Pactius, the greatest hooligan of the century. The temptation to run off with all that money is just too strong for poor Pactius, so his plan is to hire a bunch of mercenaries, take over the capital of Lydia, and basically recreate Croesus's kingdom for himself. You know, the kingdom that Cyrus literally just took over. As soon as Cyrus's general showed up, Pactius ran away to Ionia and conquered a few random cities along the coast, begging him, "Please, I just want a little kingdom." It did not end well for him. At this point, Cyrus has an empire spanning from the Indus River to the Hellespont. His only real rival was the Babylonians. Well, that just won't do. Going back to Herodotus for a second, supposedly Cyrus redirected the Euphrates River to get to Babylon. The Babylonian king Nabonidus isn't worried though. He received a prophecy from the god Marduk that the Persian Empire was gonna take care of itself. There was no cause for alarm.
Knock, knock, open up the door, it's real!
And that's all the conquering out of the way. His son would get Egypt later, but that's a story for another time. I've still got some clickbait to follow through on though. Cyrus cleans up the empire and makes a cylinder telling everyone what a big deal he is and how Marduk likes him so much better than that other guy anyway. Now most of what survives from Cyrus's lifetime is propaganda, kinda like how the last Iranian Shah called the Cyrus cylinder the first declaration of human rights, even though he might have had some bias when it came to convincing everyone that Iranian Shahs are super prestigious and always on the side of human rights. Still, he wasn't just good at sticking pointy things into people. He set up a sort of feudal system where the person in charge of administering his section of the empire was not the same person in charge of the army, and that lasted for a good 1,000 years or so. He also did a lot of construction. He kind of became the archetype of a good king for centuries, if not millennia. And of course, he was religiously tolerant and made a very good impression on this one local religion on the fringe of the Babylonian Empire called Judaism. A long time ago, I said this. Illiam's father was best buddies with Earl James Stanley, who just so happened to be the Lord of Man, the most biblical-sounding title a person can hold. Yeah, I lied. King of Kings probably beats it, but even better than that is Messiah. Yeah, apparently, Messiah isn't always the Messiah type deal. Back in the day, it used to refer to any old savior of the Jewish people. Cyrus is the guy that ended up rebuilding the Jewish temple and letting the Jews in Babylon return to Judea, or at least that's the story passed down by tradition. But either way, he is officially the one and only non-Jewish Messiah. The Messiah wasn't without his faults, though, as made evident by the way he died. Allegedly. Cyrus wasn't quite done conquering after Babylon. He may have been in the planning phases for conquering Egypt, but first he decided he would try to expand into Central Asia and conquer the nomads living there because, yeah, totally, what works for an urbanized empire will definitely work on nomads. He wants to marry their leader Tomyris, but she turns him down, so he falls back on bigger army diplomacy. Tomyris says, "Alright, let's do this thing. 5 days, that big open field, be there, or be square." And Cyrus learns, somehow, that these people have never had wine before, which seems unlikely. But the night before the battle, Cyrus leaves a camp full of his men nearby with just an obscene amount of alcohol, and Tomyris' son leads an army in and kills them all, then goes, "Ooh, what's this mysterious dark liquid?" And the whole army guzzles it all, meaning they either didn't recognize the taste of alcohol, or they'd never had any alcohol in their lives and then developed an immediate taste for it. They show up to battle the next morning, half of them hungover and the other half still sloshed, and Cyrus slaughters them all. Tomyris hears about this. She's pissed. She comes out of the woodwork with a whole new army and kills Cyrus in what Herodotus describes as the bloodiest battle of the ancient world. Then she stuffs his head in a wineskin full of blood. God, look at me. I spent a whole minute and a half talking about his death, and now I don't know how to abruptly end the episode.